Today on Locked On Canadiens, we don't need to add Kent Hughes to the list of GMs that spent like drunken sailors. Why we can be confident in this front office, that's what today's episode is all about.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We want to thank you all for making us your first listen. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. My name is Laura Saba, also known as The Active Stick. You will have seen my work back in the day on Habs Eyes on the Prize. I was also a producer in Hockey Primetime that was on SiriusXM. And my wonderful co-host used to be on Rabid Habs, and he produced, wrote, and starred in the Build podcast before we stole him away to do this show every day. Ian Boisvert, how are you doing today?
Doing well, especially relatively speaking. The Canadiens were quiet in the money thrown around contest that happens every year on this July 1st. There are some holes that the Canadiens still have in their roster now. In fact, there are probably a few new ones now that we know who's not coming back. But look, they started the day off with a big trade that I'm not sure a lot of us really saw coming. There was smoke between Montreal and St. Louis, but these two players going back and forth for one another is not really what we expected. And we've got a lot of thoughts about it. It's a pretty consequential day for the Montreal Canadiens, even though they did not engage in that drunken sailorness by just throwing money around all willy-nilly.
So we're going to start, obviously, with the trade that sent Logan Mailloux to St. Louis in exchange for Zachary Bolduc. And then we're going to talk about the holes that they still have and that they need to fill. And finally, we're going to talk about the moves they did make today, which was a lot of shoring up the Laval depth, including a very intriguing goalie move. So we are going to get into that right away. Let's talk first about sending Logan Mailloux and getting Zach Bolduc back. This seems like a trade that is a win for both teams and both players.
Yeah, let's start with Logan Mailloux on this one. Usually we take the Habs angle first, but I want to start with Logan Mailloux in case there are any Blues fans who are jumping in here to sort of understand what player they got in Logan Mailloux. This is a guy that became expendable in Montreal, not really by his own play, but by the fact that the Canadiens have David Reinbacher ahead of him, and they've since added Noah Dobson. Unless they were going to play a guy like Logan Mailloux, who has incredible offensive upside on the third pairing, that was really the only thing that was going to happen. He was only ever really going to find an NHL job elsewhere. There's still deficiencies in his game. His decision-making is still not truly there. You'll need to, the coaching staff will need to work with him on figuring out how to make proper decisions. Defensively, he can lapse a little bit. I noticed in the playoffs, especially, he gets beat to the outside on the rush quite a bit, which shouldn't happen for a guy of his reach. Maybe he was dealing with something, injury-wise, but it was a constant for him. But the offense is a weapon. His shot is a weapon. That is, if you are banking on the upside of Logan Mailloux, you are banking on the upside of like a 15-goal-a-year defenseman. Like, that's the kind of guy that you're hoping he turns into. And then you hope the rest of the defense can just be NHL average. And if that's the case, you've got a really intriguing prospect in Logan Mailloux. So just wanted to sort of set the table for folks who might not be aware of his situation in Montreal and why he was moved. A lot has happened since he was drafted. Obviously, a lot happened before he was drafted. That's why the Canadiens were picked him at 31. He should have been gone much further in that draft had he not been involved in some legal troubles over in Europe. So, and it's not to push all that under the rug. The Canadiens have said that he's been a model citizen since then. We have to take them at their word for that. But that's sort of why Mailloux became expendable in this sort of deal. Zach Bolduc. Now we can move on. Let's move on. We'll leave Mailloux there. We'll talk about Zach Bolduc. This is an exciting player for me, just personally looking at how the Canadiens are building out their top six. They get a 22-year-old forward who just finished his 21-year-old season, his rookie season. He had 19 goals, 17 assists for 36 points as a 21-year-old, ninth among Blues forwards in 5-on-5 ice time. His on-ice expected goals for at 5% was at 5-on-5 was 53.2%. Only Dylan Holloway had a better number there. And the Blues expected goals at 5-on-5 dropped with Bolduc off the ice. So he was a positive impact player for the Blues all year. What I found funny was he was a slow starter. From October to March, in those 50 games, he had 8 goals, 12 assists for 20 points. In the 22 games from March through mid-April, he had 11 goals, 5 assists, and 19 points. So almost the same amount between the first 50 games and the last 22. He only had 1 point in the playoffs and assist in that Winnipeg series. This is a really fun ad for the Montreal Canadiens. Not only are they getting a guy who's, sort of, he's a hometown kid, he's a Quebec area kid, but he's also, exactly the kind of player that they need. He's going to forecheck. He loves to forecheck. He loves to get in on the rush and take the puck away from guys. But his shot is also pretty lethal. Like, I think we're talking potentially 30 goal upside for this kind of player.
Yeah, obviously everything has to fall into place, right? But I think the system that Marty wants the Canadiens to play does favor this player. I think he's somebody that I feel is going to thrive in Montreal, given who he's going to be playing with and given who he's going to be playing under. I feel like this it really, to me, it did come out of nowhere. When we talked about Logan Mailloux, like it was in the Islanders trade situation when there was smoke about Noah Dobson. There was also like conversations about Jordan Kyrou, and clearly St. Louis and Montreal had enough conversations that it evolved into this. I feel like this is like Montreal is a good place for him to land. I also think that they're going to figure it out. It does not, I want to be clear, it does not solve their center issues because he did not play center very much. If the Canadiens feel they can turn him into one, that's one thing. But his faceoffs are not strong. I don't think that that's what they got him for. I really think that was a situation where there was a guy that they liked that, as you pointed out, he's strong on the forecheck, and that's something that they want to do. And we saw it all throughout the season. The games we complained, the forecheck wasn't very strong. The games they did well, we had a lot of positive things to say about the forecheck. So I feel like this is where he fits in. He seems excited, right? The Canadiens seem excited. It's a situation where everybody's going to be, I think it's going to work out for everybody. As for Logan Mailloux, like I know there was a lot of, every time we talked about his shortcomings, people would say that we were hating on him, but like we have to admit that, he has that physicality, he has that shot, but he needs to be better at his defensive decision making, and he needs to be better at that in I almost said Columbus for some reason, in St. Louis too. But we don't want him to fail. Like we have never like set out and wanted this guy to fail. In fact, it's the opposite. We wanted him to succeed. So all of that would be worth it, right? But I think St. Louis will like what they're getting.
Yeah, I do too. It looks like Doug Armstrong noted that there's a spot on the Blues roster for him. So it's really his to lose. So it's a great opportunity for Logan Mailloux to step into camp, and he has to not lose a roster spot instead of in Montreal where he'd have to take one that really didn't belong to him. So it's a much different sort of approach to the season for him. I want to talk really briefly about the thoughts of Bolduc at center. He played center in juniors. He says he can play center in the NHL. He says he's versatile. He can play every position. I wish one reporter would ask him when he says I could play every position. Okay, can you play goalie? I just wish kind of maybe once they'd ask that very stupid question just to make me feel a little bit better about wanting to ask it myself. But I thought Hughes kind of gave away the goat here in saying in his press conference that the Canadiens are going to continue to search for a second line center. He said, for us, I think it's always more by the trade market rather than in free agency, that we rather address the center position. And this is the key part. We haven't done it yet. We're ready to start the season as is, but at the same time, we're going to keep working the phones. So he doesn't find that the 2C is solved, which obviously it wouldn't be. They didn't acquire a natural center yet. Now, if they go into camp with Doc and potentially Bolduc working at that second line center role, and maybe, hey, one of them actually shows up and can do it admirably for a little while, that's why I think he says they're comfortable going into camp the way they are, but they're going to keep working and see if they can grab a second line center somewhere else. I just found that to be an interesting line from Hughes. It doesn't seem like, it's not like when they grabbed Jonathan Drouin, right? It's kind of a similar deal, right? A young defenseman for a young Jonathan Drouin. Mm-hmm. And, they get a guy who's a hometown kid, who's a winger, who they think can play center, and they force him to play center, and it never works, and it completely burns out that entire all the goodwill earned in that deal.
Yeah.
Like it seems like I don't know if they learned the lesson from that, but I don't think the Canadiens have any appetite to go down that path because they don't need to.
Did you see in the Noah Dobson, the post Noah Dobson trade, like Kent Hughes' media availability, he was talking about how he was on the phones for every waking moment for the past 3 weeks, like leading up to that trade. I have a feeling that Kent Hughes is really annoying to other general managers. Like that's where that's my
Yeah, I'll
feeling.
just trade you this guy so you can shut up. Like,
Yeah.
and that's cool. That's our general manager. I don't got to talk to him every day.
Yeah, you have to deal with it and give us a player that we're gonna like. But I really love like the way that they approach things, and they're gonna have to continue to do that because there's still holes in the Canadiens lineup. And we're gonna talk about that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and your spending all in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I started using Monarch, one of the things that became so clear to me was all that incidental spending I was doing on a daily basis. You know, the little treat culture, I am by far a victim of it. And so Monarch Money really helped me see the light on that. And I'm a lot smarter about my spending now. I still allow myself treats, but Monarch Money helps me keep everything in check. And honestly, it's like it's been amazing to see the difference in my daily financial life and also watching my wealth grow. So you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money, just like I did. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, free agency day saw some unsurprising departures from Christian Dvorak as well as Yoel Armia, leaving a couple of things the Montreal Canadiens still need to make up for. And they also still haven't obviously talked. We talked about they haven't solved their second line center situation yet either. So, what do you think? Ian, like for me, I think when we didn't hear about conversations or talks or anything like that, I think the writing was kind of on the wall that these two players were leaving. And I don't necessarily know that Montreal is worse off for it just yet. Like I liked both of those players here, especially Yoel Armia. I really liked what Christian Dvorak brought after Four Nations. But I don't know that it's not replaceable or even even possible to upgrade upon.
Yeah, I think it is possible to at least replace the impact that those players had. Um, it's going to be difficult to do that at the free agent level. This is going to have to be, Kent Hughes getting creative and adding somebody via trade, or they just feel confident enough in some of their options coming up from Laval that they're like, we'll let it ride this year, and we'll hope that we've improved our top six enough, we've improved our defensemen enough, so that our bottom six forwards won't have as detrimental of an impact. I am a little worried about that plan. First of all, Christian Dvorak leaves. He signs a 1-year deal in Philadelphia for $5.4 million. Christian Dvorak got a raise. That was kind of it was surprising to me to see that number, and it makes a ton of sense why Dvorak is no longer a Montreal Canadien. Thank you for your time, Devo. We appreciated it. We cannot pay you that amount of money. That's not happening. With Yoel Armia, he signed a little bit more of a reasonable contract. He signs a 2-year deal with an average, or a 1-year deal. Sorry, that's Corey Perry's. A 2-year deal, I think, with a $2 million cap hit. That's very reasonable for Yoel Armia. I'm kind of wondering why the Canadiens wouldn't have done that. So they need to do two things. They need to replace Christian Dvorak, and they need to replace Yoel Armia. Both of them have different impacts. Both of them are penalty killers. So I focused a little bit on the remaining penalty killers in free agency. Really, there's two that interest me. Luke Cunnin, he led the Jackets forwards in 4-on-5 ice time. Jackets penalty kill was 22nd overall, so maybe not the greatest option, but it is one of the options left. And Brett Leeson, third most 4-on-5 minutes by a Ducks forward. Again, Anaheim's power penalty kill was not very good either. But you kind of have to separate. I think you might have to try to separate those players from the teams that they're on, and maybe things change a little bit. But I don't know that the Canadiens are certainly in their bottom six worse off today than they were on June 30th. They are. Like, it's tough to imagine a world where they go into the season with the core that they have in that bottom six, just because it's very young. It's very young. It's very raw. They still need another left shot center to take faceoffs deep in games when they need to win them. Which is why, like, the Joe Veleno interest is perplexing to me. I think some people are positing him as a Christian Dvorak replacement, and then, I've brought that up that he's not a Christian Dvorak replacement. It wouldn't be a good fit. People said, okay, well, he's Jake Evans is going to take over for Christian Dvorak, and he's the Jake Evans replacement, and that's not better either. If anything, if you're looking at Joe Veleno is the Emil Heineman replacement. Like, that's more along the lines of what that player can be. Other remaining centers after, late into day one of free agency: Jack Roslovic, Andrew Mangiapane, Pius Suter, and very interestingly, Evgeny Kuznetsov. And I don't know what is going on there. He wants to come back to the NHL. He played with Ivan Demidov over in the KHL, and maybe there's some interest there, but I don't know how interested the Canadiens are in doing that. So there's a lot of holes still. They've done great work. And Kent Hughes has always said, and will always say, you don't fix all those holes in a single day, in a single season. You just don't do it. But these are the things we'll have to focus on for the rest of the summer and into the season, especially if they don't solve all of these or any of these, and they go in with Owen Beck filling those roles and Florian Jacki filling those roles. Like, it might be a challenge for them to start the season.
Okay, here's my thing though. What if it works out?
Yeah, I mean, it might. I wouldn't put it past them. Like, those are good young players who are, I think, to a certain extent, ready to take that next step. Whether or not they're ready to take on the amount of penalty killing weight that, Christian Dvorak and Yoel Armia had is a different question.
It absolutely is. But here's my thing is that, if it's 2 weeks into the season and they still haven't figured it out, how much rope are we giving them as a fan base? I'm not talking about Kent Hughes. I'm not talking about Jeff Gordon. I'm not talking about Marty. I'm talking about us as a fan base. How much rope are we giving Owen Beck and Florian Jacki if they get thrust into those roles? When I say Florian Jacki, I'm thinking of him more of an Emil Heineman replacement, not as the center, and Owen Beck as the fourth line center, let's say.
You know how much rope I'm giving them? I'm giving them until December 18th. And I picked that date because that is the day the Canadiens traded Justin Barron. That's when they decided they were done with that experiment. They said, this isn't working. We need somebody that will help now. And they traded that young player for a veteran player. I'm not picking that date, seriously, but around that time, right? Into December, late December. Like, if it's not clicking by then,
you got to make a change.
You have to make a change. So, like, they don't have to go into the season with these fixed. It'd be nice if they did. We'd feel a lot more stable about their chances of competing this next season and hopefully avoiding the pitfall of the bad start they had last year, which is so important. Like, we cannot repeat what happened last year. But I'm excited to see how they fill it out. This front office has never built the bottom six for this Canadiens team. I mean, because you look at it, it was Dvorak, Gallagher, Anderson. All those guys were already here. It was Armia. Heineman Evans was the only one they added, and Evans. Yeah. They put one player in their bottom six. So, like, I'm fascinated to see how they start to build this out and what guys they think they want to have. Do they want to have guys that remind them of Yoel Armia, the store brand version of those players, or do they have a different vision for how that plays out? Very interested in how they decide to do that, because it's the first time they're really getting a crack at it.
Yeah. And honestly, like, it's going to be really interesting because you're getting so much turnover on the special teams there with all of these players that they've added. And I'm including Ivan Demidov as an addition at this point. Like, he only played a couple of regular season games. Like, so here's my question to you. What happens to Alex Newhook now?
I mean, I think at this point, unless they want him to center Ivan Demidov and Laine/Bolduc. By the way, that's a fascinating discussion to have as well. Which one of them is in the top 6? Which one of them is in
It's
on
on
the
the
third
third
line?
line.
Like we could debate that for weeks, which we
Yeah.
might have to, depending on how quickly Ken Hughes starts to make more decisions. But like I don't know. I think the hope was that Alex Newhook would become that Christian Dvorak type guy, and I think they're going to try it. But I just don't see it. They're different players with different skill sets and different talents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Christian Dvorak, Alex Newhook can't do the things Christian Dvorak does, and Christian Dvorak could not move like Alex Newhook could. Like they have different, they're not, one's not bad, one's not good. It's just they're different players.
They are. And so it's going to be really, really fascinating to watch. But in the meantime, it's not like the Canadiens sat around and did nothing all day. They did make a lot of moves for Laval, and that's coming up in just one moment. All right, Ian, where do you want to start? Do we want to get all the others out of the way and then get into Kaapo Kahkonen, or do we want to talk about Kaapo Kahkonen first?
Let's get Kahkonen out of the way first, because I think this is the most interesting conversation to have amongst the depth players the Canadiens added. So Kahkonen, I believe, was the first one of the day for Montreal, the first of these depth adds. Kahkonen signs 1 year, $1.15 million. It is a one-way contract, so he gets paid the same amount in Laval as he does in Montreal. I know there's a misunderstanding out there that, one-way means he needs to be waived to be sent down to the minors, and two-way means he doesn't. That's not true. That is video game logic. That is not how this works. One-way and two-way just points out how you get paid. And one-way means there's one salary. I get one salary the whole time. So what's interesting about his cap hit, the 1.15 million, is that it is exactly the buryable amount. It is exactly the amount of money that a team can bury on one player's contract when they send them to the minors. So if the Canadiens get through camp and they decide to send him down to Laval, they can do that with that 1.15 million. All of that goes off of the cap. It is buried in the minors. And you will have to waive him to get him sent to Laval, but he's a $1.15 million goalie. Who's going to have room for that at that point? Who needs a goalie? So I think they've done a great job of waiver proofing this goalie. Also providing an AHL option as a veteran backup for Jacob Fowler. You might find the name Kaapo Kahkonen to be familiar, and it's because he stood on his head against the Laval Rocket in that Eastern Conference final against the Charlotte Checkers. So they know this goalie pretty well. They watched him outduel Caden Primo, and they said, "That's our guy now. Caden Primo's gone. Kaapo Kahkonen is my new best friend." So I think I think that he is a Laval Rocket goalie to start the year. I think that's what the intention is. Just picking apart all of the clues in this contract and how the NHL rules work, it makes the most sense to me that they're going to waive him at the end of camp and get him down to Laval. I know some people are like, well, just send Jacob Dobich down to the AHL and have this guy in the NHL. Go ahead.
When is Jacob Dobich going to develop? And when is Jacob Fowler going to develop? You don't need a goalie controversy in Laval. You need a player that is going to mentor and turn Jacob Fowler into an adult. That's it.
Yeah, and Dobich is going to be the backup regardless of whether or not he's in the AHL or the NHL.
Yeah.
Because you're starting Jacob Fowler because he has the longer development runway and you want to get more information out of him. And Jacob Dobich has proved that he is a perfectly reasonable backup goalie at the NHL level. In the playoffs, in the games that he had to play, yes, they lost those games, but he was really good. He made some killer saves against Washington in that first round series when he was called upon.
He's a great goalie. I don't know if he's the goalie of the future, but he's a great goalie.
Yeah, and he's a great goalie to be able to roll out there, 30 times, 25 to 30 to 35 times a year, so that, you don't need to play Montembeault 8 straight games. Please don't do that again. I think that's what this move was for. It was to provide an AHL depth option who you could also, in the case that Dobish or Montembeault does get injured, you can call up Kahkonen to back up at the NHL level. And that way you can leave Jacob Fowler in Laval. You don't have to worry about calling him up. You don't need to worry about who's going to back up at the NHL level. You have that built in Kahkonen. So I think that's the play here. Just the fact that this cap hit is exactly the amount that you're allowed to bury, that kind of gives away the game for me. Like, I kind of understand that that's why they would do that and why it's valuable for that player. It's a one-way contract. He gets that regardless of whether or not it's in Laval or Montreal. That's a sweet deal if you're especially a backup goalie in the AHL making $1.15 million US dollars. By the way, you get paid in US dollars in the NHL and the AHL. So it's a sweet deal for Kahkonen.
I think so too. I think it's a great situation for him. But for me, like, I think the biggest message this sends is that they are lengthening the runway for Jacob Fowler. They will not rush him. They will see what he's got. They will grow him because they so in the Noah Dobson press availability, Kent Hughes alluded to 3 years from now. So I don't know if he was tipping his hand there or not. And it was about something else, right? But the idea in my head was like, okay, so this team thinks that 3 years from now, they're going to be one of the top teams. They're going to be the teams that are, like they're going to go far in the playoffs. That's when they're going to start being a contender. Like, that's what I heard in that sentence. Whatever, I can't remember the question he was answering. But so like this gives Jacob Fowler time. This also gives him time to figure out that number 2 center option too.
Yeah. I think they've done one of the things that this front office has done exceptionally well is positioning themselves within a competitive window and kind of keeping that gray for us, but giving us enough to believe that it's on the way, that we don't. I'm not like, when are they going to be a competitor? I know it's going to be soon. We're just watching it unfold. But they have not, Hughes said in his press meeting on July 1st that he hopes to be a playoff team again. So we've gone from, we want to be in the mix, which is not, and now we hope to be a playoff team. I think those are different things. I think they have moved the needle up a little bit more. But this goaltending ad, I think it's only to strengthen the developing goalies, whether that's Dobish or Fowler. The other AHL ads, we should touch on these. Alex Belize's back. That's phenomenal news. Really love that player. He accepts a 2-way deal to come back. So he would make more if he ever gets called up to the NHL. And I think the Canadiens would feel pretty comfortable having him come up and play in a fourth line role for them. But if not, he's a great, veteran ad or re-addition to Laval. So great to have Alex Belize back. It was weird watching him play in Hartford. I would go and see him play Laval in Hartford, and it was weird. Nate Klerman is also added, a right shot defenseman, 27 years old, added in the AHL, a 2-way deal for both of those guys. And Sammy Blais, who just won the Calder Cup with Abbotsford, comes in he is on a 1-way deal, so he's making $775 in the AHL no matter what. 14 goals, 26 assists for 40 points in 51 games for Abbotsford. That's just a good depth add. I remember when Sammy Blais was in the NHL, like, it's not that long ago. He could probably play on a fourth line if you needed him to. It's just exciting to see. It's exciting to see a couple of hometown guys, one of them coming back and one of them coming to Montreal for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like, to me, Alex Belize always feels like a Laval Rocket, right? Like, doesn't matter where he goes, he belongs in Laval.
Yeah, retire as number when they're done.
Yes.
I think that's the move. By the way, before we move into trivia, I just want to make one note. The Toronto Maple Leafs signed Michael Pezzetta to a 2-year contract. So when do we start to extort the Maple Leafs for tampering? Because we knew he was going to Toronto 3 days ago. And there he goes off to Toronto. And, the Leafs get to be super mad about Mitch Marner. And I know they're different players, but the tampering is still tampering.
How funny would it be if, like, this whole thing, like the Canadiens initiated something and it became a whole thing because of Michael Pezzetta, of all players?
Yeah, that's the chaos agent that player is. So that would make all of the sense in the world. I would love to see that happen. It won't, but a man can dream.
Yes.
All right. Let's do our trivia and then head out of here. Yesterday's question was about offer sheets. Montreal Canadiens have seen one of their players offer sheeted twice in their history. The last one was Jesperi Kotkaniemi, but who was the first? Do you know the answer to this one, Laura?
No, I don't think we discussed it.
We didn't. It was Larry Robinson. He was offer sheeted by the LA Kings in 1989. So there wasn't really unrestricted free agency at that point. So you would receive an offer sheet. The Canadiens decided not to match. So they didn't even get any compensation. Back then, when you didn't match, you just lost the player. So he goes directly to LA in one of the weirdest moves. It's always weird to see those legends play on different teams. It's always weird looking back and seeing Guy Lafleur with the Nordique or with the Rangers. It's always super weird. Robinson is one of those as well. Joe Segredo gets the answer right this time. All right. In honor of another UFA signing, or should I say dishonor of that UFA signing, Lars Eller signed in Ottawa, which makes me feel gross. I do not like that at all. It gives me Eric Gryba flashbacks. We fought a war against Ottawa on Lars Eller's behalf, and there he goes. It's sickening. I don't love it. Let's look back at some former Habs and Sens. How many players have scored at least 50 points as a Montreal Canadian and 50 points as an Ottawa Senator? So who has played for both of these teams and has scored at least 50 points for each of them? If you know the answer of how many or who they are, put it down in the comments below. Send it to us any way you know how, and we'll shout you out on the next episode of the show.
That is a great question, and now I'm starting to get sick thinking of all the players who played here and then also played at Ottawa.
Yeah, it's gross.
All right. Oh, to clarify, it's 50 points overall, not 50 points in one season, right?
Correct. 50 points in their Senators' career and 50 points in their Canadiens' career.
Perfect. You heard the man. And our trivia, as you know, you can answer by leaving it in the YouTube comments. You can also email us the answer at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Also send your mailbag questions there, please. We love hearing from them and hearing from you, and send pictures and stories and all of that. We love that. You can find us all over social media. We're on TikTok at Locked On Canadiens. We're on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. We are on Blue Sky as Locked On Canadiens. I forgot the other one. TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram. Oh yes, Gmail. Locked On Canadiens at Gmail. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. The Canadiens have a lot to do this off season, and we will be with you the entire time. Make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with a special crossover edition tomorrow.